this little wrap up. I want to introduce Robert Alonso Jr. He's our new CFO.
Yay.
Is this a new position? I think?
It's a new position here at Leisure World.
That's where it is. And so we're just thankful for him to accept our invitation. I just met him at the community barbecue picnic,
Yes.
and he graciously accepted, but he said, put me on my schedule, let me know when and all that, and we worked that out. And so I don't want to waste anybody's time, especially yours. And time is money, I know that. So the floor is yours. I mean, you want to sit up here or you're
Okay.
whatever. I mean, I'm just moving right out of here.
I can slide right next to you.
All right, come on. So thank you very much for coming. And
My pleasure.
I don't have his bio, but I think everybody
I'll
read
share
it in
some
the newspaper.
information about myself. Thank you for the invite. I find it refreshing to be able to get out and meet the community as well as some of the groups that we have going on here to better understand what Leisure World is all about. Having grown up in Montgomery County for most of my adult life, I am very familiar with Leisure World, how it was developed, the location, and the mindset for how the different mutuals operate. Not to the same extent that I have that knowledge now from actually working here, but I was familiar with Leisure World prior to accepting this opportunity. John was good about giving me some talking points. I wrote down some notes so I cover a lot of things. I thought I'd go over my background, talk a little bit about some of the goals for the finance accounting department, how I feel I can support Bob in his role as general manager of the community, and then answer any questions that you all may have out there. I'll start back very early in my career. My first true professional job was with a company called Carrollton Enterprises. They were a property management real estate development firm based out of Beltsville, Maryland. The founder of Carrollton Enterprises was Albert Turner, and he was the first mayor of New Carrollton because he built out that community. When I started working with him, he basically only had the office sector still left, and he reacquired the restaurant chain that he had. He had Plata Grande, which was a Mexican restaurant. One was in Columbia, one was in Beltsville, one was in Annapolis and Richmond. Ocean City had a location, but that was long gone by the time that I joined him. And that was my first experience with property management. I started out working there in the hotel division as the night auditor to put myself through college. And as opportunities opened within the company, I moved over into the corporate life of Carrollton and really understood property management, common area maintenance billings, trying to control those fees so that way the assessments to the tenants were kept low, vacancy rates, and trying to attract new tenants into the shopping centers and office parks, and some of the concessions you have to give as a landlord. Not exactly relevant to Leisure World, but I did have that experience early in my career, so it was easy to embrace when we talk about Leisure World and the myriad of activities here besides the MedStar health building leasing that happens in the other facilities. I thought it'd be a great marriage of my very early in my career to now. I left Carrollton Enterprise after about 8 years to go work for a restaurant company called Planet Hollywood. This was back in the mid-90s when Planet Hollywood meant something. It was an up and coming restaurant chain that was owned by the celebrities. They really didn't own it, but it was a good marketing tool. And what I took from that experience was the focus on customer service. Again, my role was in the accounting side. And you say, well, how does customer service relate to on the accounting side? Well, walking through the restaurant and seeing people that are taking pictures of themselves and family members next to memorabilia that we had there. They didn't have selfie sticks back then. It was all regular cameras. Offering to take the picture of the family because, as you know, when you go on vacation, someone is always excluded from the picture. Being aggressively friendly is what that was called for. Planet Hollywood also put a high value in cross-training employees. So although I was a back-of-the-house employee dealing with accounting, I was trained to be a host when the host stepped down and they needed help. I was trained to be selling merchandise. We had a great gift shop, which in most locations attributed to about 40% of the sales of the restaurant. So again, the focus being on customer service, doing anything for the customer, even though, it wasn't directly related to accounting. I truly believe that was the foundation for where my view of accounting and customer service and what I do really started. I say that because when I was at the picnic, people were saying, "Oh, don't you have better things to do than handing out cookies?" And the way that I view my job is my title is CFO. Yes, I'm in the accounting department, but I'm here to serve the community. And if my focus needs to be at that day to be handing out cookies, to meeting with the residents here, I'll do it. If it requires me to be helping out and setting up for an event, I will do it. I'll work around my other schedules because that's the type of person and the skills that were instilled in me very early in my career. Not saying I'm an accountant and that's all that I'm doing, because if that was the case, I'm not exactly sure I would stay within the field. Planet Hollywood was very much also a personality-driven organization. And again, I was blessed to be working for them because accountants don't usually have personalities. I'm making a very general statement against my profession, very much numbers oriented, and you couldn't just be, numbers oriented there. You had to have had a personality, connecting with people, and trying to, service the employees. Also at that opportunity, I learned about translating complex financial information for non-financial people. You have general managers of the restaurants that are excellent in running the restaurant, but they may not have any accounting knowledge whatsoever. And prior to me coming there, the general manager had shared that he felt intimidated by not knowing the financial information, and the accounting team that was there would not embrace when they have a question, to think, well, you should know this, you're the general manager. Well, no, he's the subject matter expert in running the restaurant. I believe in partnerships. My subject matter expertise is on the accounting side of things. Let's work together to improve on the operations of the restaurant. So that's what I bring to the leisure world, is this knowledge of recognizing who is the subject matter experts and what can I do to partner with them to make their lives easier and to improve the operations of the company. Fast forward a couple of years, I went to work for the Maryland Food Bank, and that was probably until at that point was my most rewarding professional job, because it wasn't just accounting, it was serving our community, it was understanding the needs of food insecure individuals, and finding ways to reach the rural parts of Maryland as easily that we've been reaching in Baltimore. So it was my first nonprofit organization. I really wanted to focus on nonprofit groups at that point. Having been on the corporate treadmill for a while, I wanted to take a step back and have a better work-life balance. And the calling for that, again, was working to improve our communities. When I started working for them, they were distributing about 9 million pounds of food. And 8 years later, when I left, we were up to 45 million pounds of food. My role in that process was focusing on process improvements and efficiencies and finding the way to reach these markets that we were not able to reach before in an efficient way. So it was introducing new accounting tools to track what the cost of a pound is to deliver to Western Maryland versus the Eastern Shore. What the food drives message should be. We have the food drives here. We put cans out, we collect cans. Well, that's really the most inefficient way for a food bank to be able to serve the hungry out there, because the $2 that you spend on that case of corn, they can take that $2 and leverage it to $8 to $10, depending upon the market that they go to get more, because they're able to buy wholesale in bulk. So that, I did not know that before working there, but it was one of the things which helped us get from 9 million to 45 million by educating communities, going out into food drives and educating communities that, great, we'll take your food. And I understand people like going to the grocery store with their family members and buying that can of corn. It's a tangible thing that they're doing, so it means a lot to them. With family members and trying to teach them about civic mindedness, but also saying that's great, but this is what we could do more efficiently with the money versus the food. We get it at a discount and whatnot. The other part of Maryland food bank that I think is relevant here is the fund accounting aspect of things. We have all these special funds that are used here at Leisure World to help guide us for the future. We have a reserve fund, we have the storm fund, 7 different types of funds out there. I can't list them all at the top of my head. But that was very much early on, is understanding special funds within the Maryland Food Bank. And also the audits. Every year we go through an audit here. Your mutuals undergo an audit as well. That was my first true exposure of running an audit from beginning to end, resolving management comment letter items which come on up. So it was a very good start for my nonprofit career. After about 8 years, I went to work for the Maryland Department of Transportation as CFO for the MTA. It was an executive appointee position under Martin O'Malley's governorship. I started there in October. The election was in November. And of course, from O'Malley, we went to Hogan, and I served at the will of the governor. And I knew that accepting the role, but I was not a political appointee. Well, after about 18 months, Hogan put his own person in there, and I was totally fine with that transition. I worked with a mentor of mine from college to really focus in on my resume and where there was gaps in it. One of the things that was pointed out was I was lacking large, complex organizations. Yes, the Maryland Food Bank was a complex organization and dealt with areas throughout the state, but nothing like a government agency to get you into another layer of understanding large, complex organizations. The things I take away from there that I think are relevant for here, one of the things that came up in my interview process is this question about transportation. What's the most effective way for us to be handling our buses here? We have no metrics for who comes on the bus, where the buses are going, where the people are going out there. Are our service times aligned with what's going on within the community? And that's something which I worked with at the MTA. Specifically, we redesigned the bus network in the time frame that I was there, and using data to find the best points of service for the community. Taking my experience from the food bank, we also spoke about food insecurity and how transportation is a key factor in food insecurity in communities, by getting access to the employment centers where buses were not going, to getting reliable transportation into where grocery stores are at. Baltimore City in particular has a lot of food deserts, which means it's a location where there's not a grocery store within 1.5 miles is the usual time line or distance that they use for that. And really bringing that to the forefront of the executive leadership of MTA, and bringing in some of my partner organizations from the food bank to speak about this very important topic out there. At that time, Amazon was building warehouses in Baltimore. There was no plan to provide any sort of buses to go over to there. But after some of that feedback, they chose to do specialized lines to the Trade Point area, which is where Amazon's headquarters are at. And that was driven mainly because Amazon needed employees. It was a great employment base. And for those that are not having employment, if you can't get, and it's not the most convenient place to get to, if you don't have transportation to get them, no amount of job is going to be able to be fulfilled out there. And again, from there, I learned about the transportation, some of the efficiencies. And as I move in my time here at Leisure World, that'll be an area where we will be looking into is the transportation, understanding, are we running the right networks? What's the best solutions? One of the issues that I've heard at the community picnic is there may be an event going on in Clubhouse 1 or 2 at 6, 7 o'clock at night, but the bus stops at 4 o'clock. And trying to align our buses to the activities that go on in the community, I think will be a very good value add for those residents that don't drive or choose not to drive to get around. My last job before coming here was at the Field School as their director of business and finance. That brought a more operational, Field School is a private independent school in Northwest DC, in the Palisades part of DC. I brought a more operational focus to my career at that role. Security, transportation, and IT all reported to me. Now, transportation wasn't the same as what we deal with here. It was, buses going to the metro stations to pick up the kids there. So it really didn't really impact that too much. But the two areas that I was able to impact, and that is relevant here to Leisure World, is I realized the inefficiencies with our technology team, that we weren't meeting the needs of the students or the faculty that was there. And we were spending a lot of money because we didn't have the subject matter expertise to handle some of these more complex issues. So similar to what Bob had done, I chose to outsource our technology team. And the great thing about that is that prior to that, we had 2 employees, a manager and a clerk, tech support, I should say. And when we needed to have, the firewall looked at, we'd hire a consultant for that at, god awful amount of money. Any more of those complex issues, we were always going out to contractors, and to me, it just didn't make any sense. And I also recognize that we don't have, for a small team to be able to hire individuals that have that broad base of knowledge is very tough. So we were able to bring in a company. We went with a company called Consentus. They are they primarily focus on independent schools and charter schools. They have some corporate clients, but they try to stay within the education sector. And because of I was not expecting there to be any sort of cost savings from making that transition. Typically, there may be some cost savings, but if you go into it with the mindset that you're going to save money by doing this, that's the wrong motivation for doing so. The reason for me for pushing for that was providing better customer service for our students as well as the staff that was there. And with that change, we were able to get 2 tech support individuals, as well as having all of the IT infrastructure managed by another company. So freeing up the staff to be working directly with the teachers, training them on the latest software and tools that were coming on out, working with the students when they had an issue with their Chromebook. And that worked out very well for the school. The other thing which I changed while I was there, again, relevant to here, but I'm not saying that this is any direction we're going to, is the security feature at the school. I outsourced security at the school for the single reason alone that in DC, contract security companies have to have professional development for their employees. They have to be licensed by the District of Columbia, annually going back to renew their licenses, and they have a commitment to doing 40 hours of professional development within that year. That was something that the school was never able to handle, to provide them with current up-to-date information. We did do background checks of our employees, but they were never routinely updated. So this was another opportunity, I thought, to transition our staff, and they did hire some of our staff to be part of that security team, but bringing in an expert because we didn't have that expertise ourselves to be able to do it effectively. It's unfortunate in the day that we live in today where security at a school needs to be at the forefront. And that's, I think, is one of my legacies in leaving the school, is knowing that we have a great team protecting the employees and students that are there. I'm not exactly sure I'd be at that same comfort level if I had not made that change. Another thing, on side notes to my experience, I'm my board president at my condo association. I've been the board president for 8 out of the past 9 years. So I understand the unique challenges that a board member has, as well as an owner of a community, to focus on community improvements and keeping things in a state of good repair, and the residents' concern about keeping your condo dues low. It's not an easy balance out there, and Bob's been very clear about talking through some of those challenges over time. But I bring that perspective that I understand from everyone sitting around the table some of the challenges that you're facing in your own mutual that we're also facing at the trust side of things. I also want to mention your Center for Lifelong Learning. After I graduated from University of Maryland Global Campus with my MBA, I was asked to come back to be a co-teacher for organizational theory and design class and a international business class. So I'd done that for about 8 years, adjunct faculty member in the evening. The great thing about that opportunity is it allowed me to be a mentor towards other up-and-coming MBA students. They can see the relevance of their degree in their current career or where they wanted to go out there. I also made a lot of great connections. I mentioned about a mentor of mine from there really helped me hone in on what I wanted to do after the food bank. So I'm very appreciative of that. That led to me being the president of the Alumni Association Board. I'm the past president. My term ended in last June, which was another way of serving our community, understanding the needs of the graduates, especially during this COVID situation where employment practices have changed, people working remotely and trying to get a job while they're in the pandemic working remotely. How does all of that work? So it's been a very valuable experience for me there. And I can talk for hours about UMGC and what their focus is on the adult learner, but I won't bore you all with that information. Some of the things that John asked me also to cover was about my financial assessment of Leisure World since I started here. I think Leisure World is in a very good place financially. For what exists today, you have great amenities, very well maintained, but we know the challenge is going to be on the reserve study, which is still in the works. There is Montgomery County and Maryland in particular, but Montgomery County and Prince George's County requires you to have a reserve study done quite frequently and to fund according to what those reserve studies show. So that is going to be a financial challenge for Leisure World. And I say challenge only because it's something new to consider to be funding to. I know a lot of the mutuals have already been doing replacement reserve studies out there. But really looking at this holistically, we've done it internally, my understanding, over the past couple of years with the PPD department looking at it. Now bringing in an external consultant will give us a better understanding for the near-term and long-term needs of the community. The challenge for that, of course, is they're going to come back and they're going to say you need to have X amount of dollars in reserves for that. And that's going to be a conversation with the community. How do we get to that point? I will challenge the community that if we don't do that, then the community amenities and the associations themselves will not be able to be properly maintained. And over time, that will have an impact on your resale values of your properties. Back to my board, I'm in Anne Arundel County. We're not required to do a reserve study, but I'm pushing for a reserve study to be done, and one's underway right now, and our community will get the results sometime in September. Because I think it's also an independent assessment of the board's responsibility. Having an independent group to say this is where your top 10 priorities need to be may be different than me walking around the community and coming up with what I think are the priorities. So there's value in that beyond just the aging out of your property and equipment and understanding what needs to get done. I think that some of the challenges that exist within Leisure World, I mentioned about the reserve study, the unknown aspect of that. Bob's been very clear about focusing on employee retention. We had done a salary survey, so we're waiting for the results of that to work into the budget. It's cheaper to maintain an employee than to have that employee leave for another opportunity and then have to train them. And that's specifically true within the trades. We bring individuals in that have little to no experience. We give them the experience, and then they leave to go work for another HVAC company because they gained the knowledge, and we've lost all that we invested in that employee up to that point. So that's one of the challenges, because again, that impacts what the trust community facilities fee and how all that filters down within the mutuals. And Bob has also been very clear about the challenges of PPD. There is no doubt that needs some serious focus. I met with the group from Montgomery Mutual last week, and they said that at one point that they were doing about $1 million worth of business through PPD, and now that's down to about $400,000 in the course of 6 years. And I think that that's very telling, because that money is truly leaving our community and not staying within us. The profit margin for that is going external. And if we were able to turn around PPD to get that to be the the quality customer service oriented group to provide the services that the community needs, that profit comes back into the trust, which benefits the mutuals and will help control some of the dues. So I'm working on several ideas for that. I have nothing to share at this point about that, but he seems to have a good understanding as to what the path forward for that. One of the things I was asked about is what my short-term and long-term goals may be here. I've been here now a little bit over 2 months. I've met my entire staff. I'm now working my way down through the organization. Like I said, I met with Montgomery Mutual today. I met with Keela on the resale side of things. I've met with Maureen on the communication side to get a better assessment of Leisure World. I met with Bill Carr from PPD, gave me a great tour of the community early on in my days. And then I was hearing from Bob what his focus thinks his focus for me should be. And some of the things I want to bring on up is I mentioned earlier about customer service. That's the tone that I'm trying to create within my accounting team to be better customer service oriented for our community. And that may be a shift from what we've currently been operating. And one of the things which, very visible, they're next door to us now. And if you walk past the door, it says, that they open for appointments between 8:30 and 3:30. And that's to be able to provide the person that's coming there with their full attention to have an appointment and that time dedicated. People would come into the office, rightfully so, and expect to be taken care of right at that moment. But the accountant that would be helping them is pressured by doing bank recs or looking at interest rates for CDs, and it's a break from their role, so they may not be able to give the complete focus to that resident at that time when they showed up at the door. Yes, they'll always handle some of those unique, emergency type situations, but trying to get a more customer service oriented focus by scheduling appointments. That way that time is dedicated to dealing with each of you individually versus this pressure, I got to get this bank rec done, provides a little bit better balance for them. We're also in the budget season, so we're trying to create a budget for the trust, which then impacts how all the mutuals do their budgets. It's a new process for us with all the staff changes that have happened since the last time the budget was done. We're basically having to recreate the process. So that's been one of the focuses of mine out there. You may have heard about Morgan Stanley through the board meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. We are advocating for cash management to be done with the cooperation of Morgan Stanley. I'm not sure if you all are aware of what the process is for getting interest rates on your reserve funds in each of your associations, but it's in most situations, it's the treasurer of that board talking with their mutual accountant and Googling who has the best bank rates out there. And we don't have that subject matter expertise. We know that our timeline for when we get a quote to actually executing on that quote could be several weeks, and interest rates have changed. We know all the hassles and challenges of getting signature cards done. So what can we do to improve that process? Morgan Stanley is one of several companies that provides a cash management platform that allows you to leverage 300 banks across the nation with one signature card done directly with Morgan Stanley, even though the money is still owned by the Leisure World entity that would be making that investment. So been very excited about that. We're rolling it down the trust level. Some of our mutuals are also going with Morgan Stanley. Some are going with Merrill Lynch. We also looked into UBS, but it was not the best option for neither the trust or the mutuals because they charge a fee on top of whatever interest rates that they give you. And then I brought a contact over from JP Morgan Chase, and given our risk profile for what we're comfortable with in terms of our investments, they are not the right solution for us, and their banking options are limited to just Chase Bank. So by working with Morgan Stanley, we get access to a platform that tells us 300 plus banks and the interest rates at any given time. And that should make it easier for the staff as well as for the mutual boards to know that they're getting a good rate, because we get a menu every day of what the rates are that are out there. And when things come on up, we're a little bit better aware of that. One of the other things I've been looking at is I've met with each of my staff individually. I've heard some of their feedback, so I'm looking at how to best structure the accounting team to serve the needs of our community. We have a very much flat organizational structure over there, but really two distinct groups. You have the mutual accountant team and you have the trust accountant team. And is there a way of leveraging those groups by looking at them as groups versus how we look at them now as individuals, how they can better support each other, cross-train each other, support each other when you go out on leave or vacation, or God forbid a COVID situation happens. So we're able to provide the customer service to our mutuals because you have people that are standardizing their practices amongst the mutuals and are able to provide that level of customer service consistently across our mutuals. I hope to have that taken care of by the end of June. We're working on updating job descriptions, so that's always part of that process. Bob has mentioned about the need for a new property accounting, property management system. So we are in the process of evaluating several systems at this point. Nothing to announce at this point. We've had demos on 2 different systems. We're waiting for pricing to come on in, and understanding from other associations what their recommendations would be. So I think that that's an exciting change because that will bring, again, a different level of customer service and a push for us to use technology versus manual paper processes. In both of the property management systems that we're looking at, they deal with what's known as a lockbox service for your condo dues. Right now, all the checks, if you're not on ACH, the checks come into our department. We're having to make the deposit electronically. Well, nowadays, all of that is handled by a lockbox service who posts all those transactions, receives the transactions, posts them into your system, and then you're just doing a reconciliation and tagging it to the individual account versus opening up the mail, making a photocopy of the check, scanning the check and sending it to the bank and hoping that the bank doesn't reject it because the microcode was wrong. So that I think is going to be very much transformational within the accounting team, but I also know within the property management and the mutual assistance role that it's going to transform how they work within our community. GenArc is not, which is the system we currently use, not the best system from an operations standpoint and also from a customer service standpoint. It's just very limited out there. So I'm glad that Bob, having the support of Bob in finding the right solution is half the battle. Convincing your top person that you need a new system, they're not really focused on that, but that's been one of his mantras since he's gotten here. We need to have a better system to serve our residents. We're also dealing with the insurance renewal right now. As you know, our policies end in August, and you're all acutely aware of the renewal from last year and how that impacted us. We're in the middle now of getting some quotes. I expect to have some quotes. I'm working with Crystal on this. This is one of the things that are transitioning from Crystal and her role to me in my new role is the insurance renewal. I've worked on insurance renewals before, so it's not something which I'm having to learn all over. From fresh, I have some experience in there. The other thing which I know has been on everyone's mind has been the administration building. So we're looking at financing options for that and how we move that along to getting it completed. I know we've been talking about this for, it seems like, many a year, and Bob finally got the board to commit to it. We have a funding plan set up for it by the resale fee. And it's a matter of then finding the right financing solution for that. The other thing that John asked me to focus on was how my goals are going to support the general manager's goals. First and foremost, I want to start by saying, before I accepted this job, I read numerous editions of the Leisure World News that were published online to get a sense of the community, to get a sense for the transition, and to get a feel for what Bob's thoughts were out there. And is this someone that I could work with to support? I was very impressed by 3 things that came out of that, of his town halls that were published in the newspaper. One was better community engagement. And we saw that with the picnic that we had, the barbecue. We see that with the Juneteenth celebration. doing more things to involve the community, to instill a sense of community within the group. He's been very active in meeting the employees. We've had 2 breakfasts with him where he's getting to meet and interact with the employees. He's looking at other ways of engaging with the community outside of these town hall settings that have gone on. So that was something which I read about in Leisure World News, and then was really impressed by seeing, like I said, the barbecue and getting to meet the employees there and residents there, and hearing the feedback from the residents that was a great thing, that they've never had seen something like that happen for them. So you mentioned about customer service and bringing in, doing more things for the community. He also mentioned in there about the need for completing the administration building and getting that up and running. You probably know more about it than I do, but the cost to maintain that old building that we're currently in is not feasible to maintain it going forward. It's cheaper in the long run to start new construction to have that building going, and looking at what becomes of that property afterwards. So fully supporting that. He also mentioned again about the property management system in his town halls and how antiquated it is, and how we're not able to get the level of details to help the community better. So that I see as being another way that I'm able to support him with my vision for that. I've done system conversion, so I'm very familiar with all the hiccups that can happen, not on the property management side, but on other sides I've done it. And then lastly, encouraging better communication within the mutuals themselves and how we can tap into cost efficiencies. We're currently doing that already. We've talked about lawn maintenance now being under a global contract for the entire community versus each individual community doing their own. There's cost savings that are associated with that. For the high-rise buildings, we've gotten a unified elevator contract. So all of that is being done by one company versus each of the high-rises trying to find their own contractor. We have someone, because of our leveraging all of the buildings together, we now have somebody on site from the elevator company, so that when an issue happens, we can turn around and respond to it fairly quickly. And try to find solutions similar to that may benefit the mutuals to help control the rate of increase for the dues. I also mentioned about this cash management tool through Morgan Stanley. At some point, I will be meeting with all of the mutual boards, starting with the high-rise and bigger ones, and working my way down over the next 6 to 9 months. But that's what I plan on talking through, is the efficiencies that would be gained by going with a cash management solution. Bob's also been clear about the governance structure for Leisure World and his desire to see the board reduce in size, be more effective and representative of the community, and to follow what's known as the Carver model. You can read up on the Carver model at the food bank, where we had our new executive director come in. She shifted our board from the traditional board that was there, which was very much too much operationally focused versus strategically focused. And we brought in a consultant to get us moving forward, and the Carver model was very successful for the food bank. That's going to be a challenge over time. I think Bob is fully aware of that, but it's something which, when the community hears more about it, maybe it'll be embraced by the board, and we can get in that direction. I know I've gone on for half hour, it seems like. If there's any, I'm open for questions. Yes.
Hi, Bob. I'm Paul Eisenhower. I've been on the board 11 plus years, 3 of which were as chairman.
Yep.
All that means is I'm really familiar with everything you've talked about.
Yes.
I appreciate the direction you're going in customer service. But the one thing that really sticks out in my mind, because and it affects CLL, and that's what I was thinking, was the employee retention.
Yes.
When you're constantly having learning curves, and we've dealt with it, especially last year, and with COVID, there's a lot of, but with ENR's turnover, you know, it seems like the only EV guy we can depend on is Jose. But that's so important. And, you know, I know the residents might look at the giving the employees a raise, how about us? Well, the employees support us, and if they're always turning over, and retention in whatever way it goes is financial, but it's so important, and it really is front lines as far as you know, residents don't see it, but oh yeah.
And it's not just the financial angle of this, this is also workplace culture. Having a supportive environment where if someone is here, they can count on professional development. That also helps retain employees. The other aspect is benefits that we offer. I know that the board approved having Juneteenth off as a holiday for the employees. Little intangible things like that go a long way to helping control employee morale and employee retention.
Well, these breakfasts that you mentioned, that too, I mean, management recognition.
Absolutely.
A lot of studies say that is just as important in
Yeah.
retention as the financial.
I don't know, I was not here during Kevin's tenures, and I don't know anything firsthand. But when I attended my first breakfast, you know, the employees seemed very much, this is like the first time that a general manager has gotten everyone together. And it was an open house kind of a thing, from 7 o'clock till 10 o'clock, come into the ballroom. I may have the times wrong, but it was nothing that was set, so people could float in and out depending upon their work schedule. And they felt seen, they felt appreciated. And that's such a low cost thing that improves employee morale and can help with employee retention. So while Bob did a salary survey, he's not just focused on that monetary compensation piece, it's the entire package of culture and benefits and other ways of engaging with the employees. So thank you for your years of service on the board. I'm sure you have
For sure,
you know,
glad you're here.
perspective.
You and Bob have a very service-oriented way.
Yes.
And that's the way, what we need.
Absolutely, I would agree. Yes, sir.
This is Center for Lifelong Learning. Some of us are board members for that particular group. I'd like you to put in the back of your mind that we interrelate in two ways. One is technology. As you can see, we're on Zoom. Those of us who are instructors use technology. Making that technology reliable, making it work, having someone on site who can assist instructors to make sure that that technology is working is vitally important to what we do in the service that we deliver to residents here who are taking courses and classes.
Definitely.
Let's put that in the back of your mind. The second point that I would ask you to consider where we interrelate is when we are running multiple session courses and classes, we are charged a fee. We have to pay you in order to use a room, to use a space. What the logic of that is, I'm sure there is a logic, and I'm sure there is, or maybe not. But I think if you would put in the back of your mind that that's something for you to begin to look at as well. This cost structure that we have to meet, we have to charge residents for our courses and classes in order that we can, provide an essential amenity to those of us who live here. So those two things, put them in the back of your mind, and somewhere as you're looking at restructuring and fees and whatever else, I'd like that to be on the agenda.
Well, I appreciate that feedback, especially on the technology piece. We've been challenged in board meetings as well as on the Budget and Finance Committee when they've met in here with the system not working well. One of the things, and I'm being very broad in this assessment, I don't think that there's any one person that truly understands the system. I'm used to, in a school environment, walking into a conference room and there being a little pocket thing with instructions as to how to run the AV on there, and it's, you know, in layman's terms, at how to go from step A to Z to be able to broadcast on Zoom, because they recognize that not everyone is that subject matter expert. And yes, some people may have greater knowledge than others, but while we may not be able to get somebody in here that is able to be present 24 hours whenever there's an event going on, there are other solutions to that, and doing a little spec sheets as to how to do things, doing quarterly trainings on the AV for people that are going to be running meetings in here. I think there's all other solutions that are viable out there. But that has been something which has come on up, and it's something that Bob and I and others have, Crystal in particular, since IT reports up to her, that we've had conversations with. So nothing to report now. I would just say stay tuned. As far as the financial piece is concerned, I'll take that as a takeaway. And I would say reach out to me in about a month or two. I'll got my business cards to give on out. And as I have these conversations with Bob and others to help understand why things are done the way that they are, I may have an answer. May not like the answer. I may have an answer that we say we're not going to be charging, but I'll definitely follow up on that. So again, appreciate that feedback. Yes.
So a couple of things. First of all, just for your knowledge, what Paul was referring to, we as instructors do not get paid. So when the people are charged for
to cover your
services,
costs
it's not for
here
us,
for the meetings.
right? So it's important for you to know that. And secondly, and then I have a question as well, but I want to give a shout out to Dave Merritt.
Yeah,
Merritt.
I'm also on the board of the Democratic Club, and you may know that we had a very, very large, important forum here last Thursday night. And we had a candidate who was ill, who had COVID, and so he had to be Zoomed in to the auditorium. He helped us immeasurably, and when we found him. Because I know he's busy, so we couldn't call him, and somebody went over to the administration building and literally tracked him down. And
Pull him out of there.
And he was very, very helpful. But during the course of the evening, the people in the auditorium could not hear the person who was being Zoomed in, and that was a disservice.
Yeah.
But my question, I also have a question. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on with the restaurant and the services? And I know that they've gotten a very nice contract for them, and so I'm just wondering what's going on with that.
So I'll talk very generally because I've not dived into that. Bob has made it clear to me that under previous management, they were given a contract amendment during the COVID that basically gave them a rent concession on running the restaurant. That's something which in retrospect may not have been the best unless there was some other benefit for the community. I'll share with you, there used to be an employee discount program, I understand, and that went away when COVID had hit. Now they've introduced a limited menu for employees at a discount, so at least there's some, Leisure World is seeing some benefit of that that may not have been in the past, even though the rent has been reduced for them, or eliminated, I should say. I know Bob is thinking about ideas when that lease does come on up. And I spoke with him about my restaurant experience out there. I'll also take a step back to say that part of my Planet Hollywood experience was working down at the Disney location, which at that time was the world's highest grossing restaurant. We did about $55 million a year. And what I learned from that experience was Disney was very smart. They don't run their concessions there. They don't run the concessions at Epcot, even though they're wearing, Disney badges. They collect 20% of the sales. There's a base minimum of sales, but then they collect 20% of the sales as rent, and that's a guaranteed profit margin for them. And restaurant profit margin, you're lucky if you break even. Planet Hollywood did well because we sold about 40% of our sales were through merchandise, and you buy a t-shirt for $1 from Taiwan with your logo on it, landed here is $2 and you're able to sell it for $20. That's, covers up for the loss of the restaurant. So I think that there are models that should be looked at when it comes to renegotiating the contract when it expires. I know that Bob is fully aware of it, and he's somewhat displeased with what the decision that was made beforehand, but that's just where we are.
When is the lease up?
I don't have that information. I'll find out.
Well, just curious, if it's 3 years or 5 or.
Yeah, during COVID, there was a renegotiation, and I don't know what the parameters of that was. I think that falls under Crystal or Bob, but it's something which I'm curious about. With other things I've been tasked with, it's been a curiosity I've had to push to the side.
If we could sell the T-shirt to every Leisure World resident for $2, that might make up for a shortfall.
I am on the special strategic planning committee. There's a voting member and we have advisory member. I'm one of the advisors.
Okay.
And when we met the first time a couple of years ago, the number one topic was Leisure World needs more money. And we have to do something. It's almost like an emergency. We really need more money. And my background is in economics. I'm a professor of economics at Business College. Sure. And I also worked as a consultant to a lot of business organizations. So I said, okay, let's take a look at the budget. And I want a table showing revenues and expenditures and how much shortage there is. Then we can go from there. Then either I or we are given, I think more like I. It was given to me a table, a budget table, and the table was really weird. It has a $1 million deficit for several years. No organization can survive on that kind of budget. And I said something is terribly wrong, but I'm just an advisory member. So then we had two major topics. One was the possibility of increasing resale fee. Eventually, that was raised from 2 to 3%. Yep. And the other one was the possibility of building new units, and so that we can have some more revenue. I have no idea how we can have more revenue. We had this is all off the record, and we had a table.
Recorded.
Yes.
I'm not talking.
Okay. Let me touch slightly on that. I've read the strategic plan that was worked on and the multi-page document that is there. The way that new development adds to the communities is first of all the ongoing assessments that they would be paying for basically no other new amenities. So that's another revenue source out there. And plus, for every unit that is sold initially, there is that builder's contribution that is made to the trust. And again, that over time helps keep the other dues from being increased. I don't know, nor do I believe that Bob thinks that that's the solution going forward. New construction adds challenges to a community. And while I think it's worthy of looking into, I don't believe Bob is heading in that direction. But it's helpful to have, we're having a master plan looked at, and they may come back with suggestions to help the board. I think that that's a good investment of whatever the amount of money is, that potentially could lead to things. One of the things that was thrown on out is we could potentially get Clubhouse 2 renovated for free, relatively free, by having other units that are built on top of that. So it'd be an amenities in a building that the builder would then pay for the redevelopment of Clubhouse 2. Not saying that that's the options in going forward, not saying that that's something which is even under consideration, but it's something which was mentioned in the strategic plan, and we'll see what they come back with on the master plan.
Max has had his hand up for a while.
Yes, sir, and I'll come back to it.
Max?
Oh, yes, hi. Thank you for an excellent presentation. And I had a quick comment about electric vehicles and also a question for you.
Yes.
So with regard to electric vehicles and electrification of cars in our community, I was hoping that you'd be able to consider access to a power source more the way we think of Wi-Fi, more like a utility rather than the paradigm of gas stations, because I've noticed that in so many conversations, people think of accessing a power source more the way we drive up to a gas station, as we have done for 130 years. But I think a paradigm shift is really in order to think of it as a utility, the way you would be shocked to enter a doctor's office and they don't have Wi-Fi. Yeah. So that's just one thing. Yes, and on a more philosophical note, I was wondering how you deal in our generation, people who are keenly aware of their mortality, having maybe 20, no more than 30 years to make contributions to this community. I'm asking because I serve on the board of the Mutuals 20A, that's the Greens, Building 1 and 2, and at least half the time when any proposals are made, there's at least a dozen people who just pop out and say, oh, that won't affect me. And as you know, being on the board and having served on the board, we're called upon, especially with the reserve study now, to make decisions for 20, 30 years, some even into 50 years from now. And I keep telling my fellow members that we should be called upon to make decisions now that 3 generations from now, they can be proud of the decisions we've made today. And I was wondering how you deal with that kind of rejoinder. I'm sure you must have heard it too. Stop bothering me with about these timelines, 10, 20 years. I just want to get the lowest cost for something, and I'm not interested in anything else other than what concerns me, the here and now.
Sure.
I was just curious how you deal with that.
So I'll touch on that from 2 ways. I believe the reserve study looks out 30 years. Bob's been very clear that great 30 years, but 10 years should be the timeline that we focus on and act upon. Great to know what's going to happen down the road, but that's a shifting deadline. The part of my role that I see, I'll be meeting with the boards, is to try to engage with them in a way of best practices for board interaction, governance. I don't want to get to the governance piece because that's really not what my focus is, but to be able to speak to a board member that says, oh, it's not going to affect me, I'm not going to worry about it, to try to help educate that board as to why it does affect them. And it may not affect them, but it may affect the community. And if the community declines, you're adversely affected, or your heirs are adversely affected because property values will not be what they need to be out there. So I see my role, being the financial face of the trust, but also as a resource to the board to help them through some of these challenges. I've heard in my own community when we've talked about some of the long-term things, people are like, oh, I'm selling next year, what do I need to worry about? Right. Well, exactly. You do have to, because your other neighbors, which are all part of the same community, we have to look out for one another. And hello. The one thing which, COVID has taught us a lot, I think. And the shifting from the me mentality to the we mentality during COVID has been very much refreshing, and trying to engage my community at my homeowners association to not look at this as what is in it for me, but what is in it for we, the entire community. I've been successful more than unsuccessful, but that's really not saying too much, because you still have those people that are just mindset is internally focused to themselves. So it's a challenge, I recognize that. Taking a step back on the electric charging stations, I know that conversation is ongoing. And I know that we've looked into some of the federal programs that are out there. But I think because we are a private gated community, that may not be something which could be supported by federal programs out there. I know in Baltimore, again, I'm in Anne Arundel County, BG&E will do charging stations in communities free of charge. You just have to give them unfettered access to it. So my community is looking at doing that. And the way that they get their money back is by publishing on websites where the charging stations are. And if it's in a private community, a gated community, the people other than the residents can't get access to it. So they're not making those investments in those communities. Not saying that that's a factor here at Leisure World, but I know that that's a factor out there for private gated communities. But I know that we've had the conversations about looking at charging stations in the community. So nothing to report. I just say stay tuned.
Thank you. I'm glad you're on board. Thank you. Welcome.
Yes, I would reiterate, welcome, and thank you very much for all your comments. On the Carver model for board management, my impression is the board model is pretty entrenched for many years, or maybe since the inception of Leisure World. So how do you and the general manager plan to try to nudge the community towards a change? No one, I believe, no one wants to give up their position or their power. I mean, whatever power there is in a nonprofit board or in a non-remunerated board. But how do you have a plan for trying to nudge us towards those changes?
So let me talk through how the Maryland Food Bank heading into this. It was a board that was more operationally focused because the executive director that we had was there for 20 some odd years, 29 years, I believe. That was his first job out of college. He grew with the organization, smart person as to how to get food out in the communities, but he always felt that he was the smartest person in the room, and sometimes he wasn't. And so the board stepped in to manage things when he was, the focus of the day would change for him. When our new executive director came in, it was education of the board, what their role is, where their best efforts should be, that they shouldn't be telling the warehouse manager how to load a truck. Trust that the warehouse manager knows his job, which at that time they did, but they may not have been in the distant past there. And really educating them on what their roles should be. The board under the old executive director was people that he knew. They were not community leaders. That was one of the shifts, is over time as board terms came on up, getting a representative from Giant Food and from Safeway and from Walmart, getting some of the higher level people on the board helped to buy into this concept of what proper board governance is. Now, we can't be bringing on external resources like that because the bylaws are basically drives how the board membership is composed. But I see it being very difficult because people in power don't want to give up on that power. That's, but educating them as to why it's in the community's best interest and their best interest by bringing in an expert that can talk through what the Carver model is. And really, it's not reducing the power, it is consolidating the power to be a more effective board. I've sat through 2 board meetings, and it's interesting the level of attention that certain topics are given that have very low impact to the community from a cost perspective. And then those bigger issues which get deferred time and time again. And then, costs mount, situations come on up. So I think that the direction is great, but I don't think it'll be an easy path forward. But the way for doing that is by education, bringing on Carver expert to talk through this with the board and to guide them into the right direction.
Is a community referendum possible to change bylaws?
Yeah, well, that's it. You need 60% of the community to change the bylaws. So it's a high threshold to meet in terms of consolidating the board. But how the board functions outside of what's in your bylaws, there's some flexibility into that. I know we use Robert's Rules of Orders. We have advisory committees for almost everything that exists within the community. There was, at the last board meeting, I'm not sure who may have listened in on it, but there was this debate about combining the Energy Commission committee with the PPD committee, sorry. And there were people that were like, no, they need to be kept separate. There's no overlap to them. These were individuals that were not part of either one of those groups. And it took a member of the Energy Committee to say that they work very closely with PPD, that the Energy Committee only really meets once or twice to be dealing with it. So it makes sense from their perspective to combine these efforts. I see that as being, sort of like the grassroots effort to help control and consolidate some of these committees, which then may lead to comfort at the board level. We've talked through about the audit committee. In a lot of organizations, the audit committee isn't a standalone committee unless it is charged with not just reviewing the audited financials, but enterprise risk management, getting involved with other areas of risk to the organization. In most organizations, it's part of your finance committee. So that may be another area that we look at over time is merging those two together, because they meet, 2-3 times a year to go over the audit, and it's such an intense period in that 3 months, and we won't deal with the audit committee until, that following year. And is that the best use of those subject matter expertise? I was impressed, by the way, about the level of expertise that's on the audit committee. And I think that they'd be a valuable resource by bringing them into the finance committee, budget and finance committee. But that's a topic for another time.
And can I just address what you said? As far as changes in the governance, God knows they need it. It's a huge bureaucracy. I think attacking the board structure, like Bob said, will be hugely difficult. But I think going after realigning the advisory committees is what's going on right now. Like back to, some of them don't have to be separate. They don't have cost centers. Some have cost centers. I always consider a few of them to be heavyweight committees because everybody on there was an expert. But too many of them aren't. They're, people who are interested. But right now, I think looking at the advisory committees, the board, though, and I'll probably push it because I know Bob Kimball wants to change. I already talked to some people about when I can put on the floor, we have got to address this issue right now. But I'm thinking the advisory committees we need to concentrate on first. But before I leave the board, I want to throw that on the table.
Good.
Look at that.
I've got a comment first, but I think your presentation was really wonderful, refreshing, and encouraging to see that the dog now is wagging the tail. It's just a great change, and I really like that. One of the things I was thinking about is we just paid $450 to Zoom. Is there no way, and there are other committees or organizations that have their own Zoom licenses, and maybe there's a way to consolidate and get a campus-wide license that we all can use and so forth. Also, I'm thinking along the lines of, used to work, we had a license agreement with Microsoft where for like $5 a year, we could get all their products.
Yeah.
The same with computers. If we get this, Leisure World can go out and have one of these campus-wide things. Maintenance people, some people don't know who to call. They call, what do they call them? Geek Squad. And all that. If we can have people look at that and set something up for the residents that can use this site license, I'm sure it'd be a lot cheaper, a lot more convenient. And especially like maintenance, people don't know who to call, but, and then along those same lines, when COVID hit, we were all left on our own to go out and get the supplies, the masks, the sanitizer, all this stuff. And it would have been great for Leisure World to step up and go get a contract to supply this, make it available, even if we have to pay for it, but it's available. You can come in and buy it through PPD or wherever. Those kinds of things, we look out for the residents in some sort. And I think we're sorely in need of a guest house here. We got people coming in from out of states trying to look for apartments or places to buy in here.
Yeah.
People come in here for reunions, anniversaries, and there's just no place locally to stay.
Really no local hotel, as I think.
Right, yeah. So I do think we could maybe, I don't know, if we get Marriott or somebody come in and put one up, just give the land, let them run it for 20 years, whatever.
Yeah,
And get 20% out of them or whatever it has
Whatever
to
the
be.
case may be.
Yeah, I just think that would go a long way in helping people, especially when you move it out of here too.
Yeah.
You gotta have a place to stay, and there's just no place to do this.
And that may come up as part of the master plan discussion, so I will keep an eye out.
And that would be great to have Marriott come in and then they could run the restaurant as well.
Didn't Marriott
They
used
did
to run the
run it.
restaurant?
They
I
did,
understand. So,
The only one other little thing is, I watch these people on these buses, and I've never ridden a bus, so this is not for me, but could we not borrow Metros or somebody's software that tells you when your buses are coming and arriving at each one of the mutuals or whatever?
Yeah.
I mean, those are
Tracking
beautiful.
system.
Like,
Like
And then,
a
Yes.
tracking system.
yeah,
Absolutely.
GPS, it'll
and
be
then
here
there's the
too.
issue of security too with the buses coming.
absolutely, all of them.
You mean the Metro buses?
Well, the
Metro
Metro,
buses
I'm talking
coming.
about the Leisure
Oh, you're
World
talking
ones
about the
too.
shuttle. Well, and the idea of running later, because there are a lot of people who
Yeah.
can go to movies.
Yeah, so I just think that should be almost free because the state owns, they do the ride on,
Right.
So to touch on that, I've not met yet with Elizabeth, who oversees transportation and security. We've scheduled several times and personal things on both of us have kicked the can down the road. But there are easy software packages that can be hooked up into our buses. I think the bigger question is what is the role of transportation here at Leisure World? Is this something which we should be doing in-house? Should we be looking at TransDev, who does a lot of the services for Metro, the contract service from the several organizations that are out there? And I think getting clarity as to what the role of transportation, what the direction of transportation is, then everything else falls into line. We don't know about the number of people getting on and off the buses. Well, there's a technology solution that I know of that runs buses. They put a little cross beam and it counts anytime the beam is broken. But we don't even need to get to that technology thing. You just have a little notepad and the driver does a little tick mark on it if that's a metric that we wanted to do. So understanding what Elizabeth's perspective has been into understanding how we got to the transportation that we have, I think will help me have these other conversations out there. You mentioned Zoom. Let me look into that. I know that the trust has 1 or 2 accounts and they're used when we have meetings. But what I know is before the school got their license because Zoom was giving the schools free and then they stopped giving it for free. We'd actually purchased a Zoom license that was a generic login so multiple people could be using it. And I'm not saying that we can't do this or that we can, but maybe getting a generic one through ENR that when you sign up for a room, you can sign up for the Zoom link. And having that, because if you're spending $450 and you're only meeting, 5 times a year, I'm not saying that that's how many times you meet, but, as opposed to that $450 being used by multiple people. So I will look into that, get back to you.
Yeah, I think the site license for all these software products out there,
Yeah.
Word and whatever Apple uses, and if we we get to buy computers. I mean, most people have to go over to Micro Center if they're lucky to get over there.
Yeah, but even if you could combine even organizations together, because like I control the Zoom, I signed up for the Zoom for the Democratic Club and for Jewish Residents of Leisure World. Those are two really large organizations.
Sure.
The Democratic Club usually uses Zoom for our board meetings. That's the only time we use it, because we have somebody, when we have large meetings like we had, we use another account because we're limited. Your organizations could get together as well and share one Zoom account and just somehow or other coordinate their use of it.
Yeah.
And that would be much.
One would be probably tough, but yeah, because you need hosts.
Yeah,
Yeah, because without the
but if you
host-
have like I'm thinking Jewish Residents of Leisure World, we use that again for board meetings right at this point.
Yeah.
Not using it for a lot of other things, some presentations.
All worthy of considering. You touched on about supplies during COVID. That's an excellent idea. Hopefully we'll never have to deal with a pandemic again. I know at the school it was very tough, even though we were prioritized for getting all the PPE stuff. It was still a challenge for us. We were able to get 5-gallon tubs of the hand sanitizer, and so we had to get our own little pump bottles to distribute that, but it also helped out the employees. They were able to bring in their own little pump bottle to get it. So there are options to consider, especially the way that I also look at this comes back to what I said earlier about finding cost efficiencies and being able to do a group buy versus individuals. That's very
a lot
beneficial.
of people can't get out too, so.
Yeah.
Have somebody come down to PPD and pick something up, perfect, yeah, really. And
Now, if we only predict when the next pandemic's gonna happen, you get ahead of the ordering curve for that.
But I think the topic is broader than just past
Oh,
COVID.
absolutely.
There are maybe other areas where Leisure World could bring something in and make it available, even with residents paying for it, but do a bulk purchase.
Absolutely.
I think the mutuals have supplies that they buy through contracts. Each of them do their own thing, I think. I'm not sure.
And that comes back to, looking at how the mutuals can work more effectively together to harness that. And I see the trust as encouraging those environments and recognizing that, great, if they're all buying their own copy paper, maybe we buy a pallet, put it in the warehouse and
Absolutely.
come pick it up for $40, whatever you'd be paying for it anyway, out there. Things along those lines is where, it's in the back of my mind that I think those are good solutions to.
Economies of scale.
Absolutely, and to save money, and again, saving money reduces the rate of increase for your dues. It all is tied together.
And we'd like that.
PPD does, they cut keys and they have light bulbs and I don't know, maybe some other things.
Garbage disposals that people can buy
I
and
don't know,
install.
yeah.
Like, they have a whole rack of them. That was one of the things which stood out at me. I'm like,
Who
So there's
knew?
like a little store already there.
yeah,
I didn't know that.
I didn't know they did the keys.
Yeah, they do keys.
So we've asked, by the way, Tom Snyder to make a presentation, and I spoke with him last week. He said he was under the gun, so last week for the meeting, so.
but we had the electricity issue too that came up, so.
Hopefully he'll get back with me getting more soon.
Yeah.
I think that would be really helpful for a lot of the residents to know about the contracts and what else they do.
Oh, yeah, this is very encouraging to residents. So I think in terms of, wouldn't it be great to have some forum where the residents could hear this, well, we're not being recorded, okay. I spoke to one previous board chair after Bob Kimball started. Bob had given his long range and short range plan, general plans. And like, man, this chair said, that's the first time I've ever heard of anyone saying these are the plans. So I think the residents would really be encouraged to hear this stuff.
By the way, we are recording this, and if you don't have a problem, put at least this portion on the
I have no issues.
television channel. Yeah,
And I just want to thank you for recognizing the diversity, because I live in Montgomery Mutual. And we have our own set of situations with insurance. I'm sure you're aware of what's
Yep.
going on with insurance. But I don't think that people know. I mean, when I told people that we were paying the $50,000, they said, you need 5,000. I said, no, 50,000. So it's nice to know that people, that you're understanding the diversity of the residences.
I'm learning more about the diversity within the communities and the different types of associations. Even more so the personalities that exist within each of them. I say associations, I meant mutuals, but
Right.
personalities of those mutuals, some that require more high-touch service than others that want to be left alone out there. So in time, I'll be able to speak more intelligently about which ones owe which on that. So. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, yes,
I
thank you.
appreciate the invite. If there's anything I can do to help support your mission, you know where to reach me at. I'll give you my business cards as well for those that are still here to definitely reach on out.
Thank you so much.
Just one final question, I'm sorry. The status of the admin building or the new construction,
Yes,
is that proceeding on schedule or?
my
what's the
understanding it's
timeline?
moving right along. There is a Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission meeting coming on up for one of the final site reviews for it.
Okay.
And my understanding is Bob's hoping for the fall to break ground on it. So in my mind, it's 18 months from now that I can see us being in the building. But
Terrific.
that's my own internal. No one said to me it's 18 months, but the construction should be about 9 months to a year, and the payroll will actually get the final permit to do that.
Good.
So, great.
No, I just have one comment. First of all, I really appreciate your presentation and the push towards customer service
Yes.
and valuing the residents.
Yep.
Never heard that before, okay? So I'm hoping we see a great change. Also, the common goods that we all have to buy, as you said, we should be coming together under master contracts where the mutual says, hey, I need all new windows. There should be a master contract from the corporation that helps to get us a better price for the cost of goods, for all the services we use. And also, as far as looking at transportation, you may want to consider looking into contracting out. You could call Jewish Council on Aging today, and they could be in here running the service.
Mhm.
They do ride-on routes,
Right.
and they have all the technology, and I've worked with them for many years, so.
There are options that are out there, and I think it's worthy of considering. We may end up at the same point where we are today, but I think it's worthy of looking into it.
Yes.
I think that the reserve studies that are being done, not just at the trust level, but the mutuals may help in terms of if those mutuals were sharing information, that if in the 1 to 3 timeline, people need to replace windows, well, those 7 mutuals can look at this collectively
Yes.
to, buy that. Again, that's why I see my role as helping facilitate those types of dialogues, fully recognizing that each mutual is its own separate legal entity and their own separate personalities, and some don't like to play well with others, whatever the case may be, but to try to
But
encourage
it's
that.
costing the residents if they don't play well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And
The
so-
nice thing is that obviously you're thinking of the residents, and I don't know that we've always had that situation.
So I come back to, I started out at Planet Hollywood in the DC location, ended up in Orlando at the Orlando restaurant, and the end of my career was at corporate. And one of the most frustrating things for me when I was at corporate was hearing the employees, the accounts payable staff, annoyed because they call a general manager at noon and they're told you have to call back later on. Well, doesn't he know that I'm important? And that, we pay his paycheck? It's like, no, the customer in that seat for lunch is the one that's actually paying the paycheck. And once you have that mentality, you recognize, yes, I don't know who signs my paycheck because it's all electronically, but I know that it's the community that's paying for it. And with that sort of a mindset, it sort of shifts your perspective, at least it has for me. So
What happened to Planet
appreciate that
Hollywood?
feedback though.
What happened to Planet Hollywood? Did they morph into something else? I never see any.
So, yeah, there's only like 4 locations left.
There's one in Myrtle Beach, I think. still, isn't
Myrtle
there?
Beach closed down.
Oh, did it close down?
I opened that location.
Oh, did you?
It was, Broadway at the Beach was an excellent concept.
Yeah.
So the other thing I learned about from working for Planet Hollywood is that your concept should not be based upon celebrities. It should be based upon the core product, which is food. It was always sold on the allure of meeting a celebrity when you're at the restaurant.
Oh,
And so that was great when we were in the major markets, New York, Vegas, Orlando, Los Angeles, where celebrities come regularly. But then when you start going into second tier markets, Myrtle Beach, Gurney Mills, which is an outlet mall in Chicago, we opened up a location there. It sort of damages the brand because you're not going to get a celebrity to come in there, yet your perspective is, your selling point is, oh, come dine with the stars, you'll meet somebody. And that doesn't happen. So, and when the food's not that great to begin with, it sort of starts a cyclitic thing. The founder of Planet Hollywood has been very clear that the biggest mistake that they made was going public. But they were pressured to do so. And because of being a publicly traded company, there are certain expectations for, revenue growth, store growth, and that really did them in. But Planet Hollywood, the company, the guy behind Planet Hollywood, has the Earl of Sandwich sandwich chain. You'll see that on the rest stops going up to Delaware. He also owns. They also bought out Bertucci's Brick Oven Pizza.
oh, gee.
So they've diversified into other concepts, and they took advantage of the COVID to start ghost kitchens. They, ghost kitchens are restaurants that are run in other restaurants, but it's only delivery service. So it's only through Grubhub or DoorDash or something like that. So they introduced a bunch of other products that were out there, and that's keeping them going. So I enjoyed my time working with them. I learned a lot, and I appreciate everything that I realized that they did right after leaving them. You work for other organizations and you sort of see how things are, and while you're thinking that this is so messed up how they do things, it was actually they were very on the forefront of things. So it was a good experience.
Thank you.
Well,
Certainly, I
hopefully
appreciate
you'll
it.
say this is a great experience
Yeah.
being a leisure
Oh,
worker.
so in a lot of ways, this is the culmination of all of my experience out there. The
Bring it all
customer service
together.
aspect, transportation security from the school, going back to my early property management days. So this ties everything together, and that is what excites me, knowing that I can have this impact on the community because of all my shared experience.
We're happy to help.
Thank you again, Robert.
Certainly.